What if I told you that kids today are spending more time on screens than with their parents? Parents today are overwhelmed with finding the right parenting advice, and parents are more isolated and lonelier than ever before. But it's not because parents have no time or are disengaged. It's because every decision feels like a test. Every moment is under scrutiny, and the right way to raise a child changes every single day. Hi, my name is Lakshan. I'm your host for episode 44 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
And I'm Goldie, your co host for this episode. Lakshan and I are both ICF credentialed coaches with a shared passion for understanding generational dynamics, not just in theory, but in real people's lives. Since we coach clients across generations, we also hear about a lot of experiences that each generation has interacting with others.
We speak to parents a lot, and they talk about how hard it is to be a parent today and why. We're going to be breaking this episode down into two sections. Section one is why parenting feels so hard today, and section two is what can we do about it. So, before we get into that, Goldie, I have a question for you. You are a parent yourself of two lovely Gen Z kids. What are you hearing on the ground about parents of Gen Alpha kids today?
I think the overlap between Gen Z and Alpha is a thin line. I have to say that's one thing. But what has really distinctly set apart Alpha is this whole idea of a completely different language that they seem to be speaking. I've heard so many parents, amusingly mention words that they hear from their mouths and not understanding where did they pick that up. Very young kids, Riz and I honestly don't know many more, but I know that there is a whole other language that's emerging. I think from the fact that it's an online language. So in the same way that you and I are very familiar with the emojis culture, and the Gen Z probably really sort of fortified that a lot more, and a lot of them speak with just through an emoji because it's understood that the referencing it's making. So Alpha have added to that layer, and they've got this language which I think is, as I said, instigated mainly by TikTok culture, short form content, and I would like to believe that what they're actually doing is speaking in short form through using these words that are inspired by what they see online. And then apart from that, I also hear parents concerned about screen time, which I think is kind of an ongoing, battle they have. But more than screen time, the effects that it's having on them, which is, we're all familiar with the lack of attention and unable to cope with stress, which is caused by this, in dependence on online. A lot of video gamers. I think this is a big thing, and that sort of leads into the way they interact socially, which is also heavily based on a shared activity, which seems to be the video game. That's what I'm observing.
Yeah. So over this weekend, we were conducting a ICF level one coach training program, and of course, most of the people there were parents. A good portion of them were parents of either really young Gen Z or older to mid alphas, right? And they were talking about a few things. One of which was how while they have access to AI and ChatGPT and all this stuff, and they're able to get information like this, they are struggling. They're good at the breadth of information, but if you were to double click on them, so to say, and look at the breadth of their understanding of the information, it's not there. So this was one thing that stuck out to me, apart from like a bunch of other things. And they're also talking about how hard it is to parent them today and how different it is from how things used to be before. A lot of which came out, a lot of the things that came out in that conversation is what I want to talk about in our first segment of this episode, right? Which is why does parenting feel so hard today? So obviously, parenting is hard. It's always been hard, but today it's like an extra bit of a mess. Everybody's judging you in WhatsApp groups. your in-laws, your
Mm.
parents, your friends, your peers, your colleagues, your boss, your neighbor's yoga teacher also, right? Without really understanding what your very unique struggles are, because they are really unique, right? The more common ones, the first one, of course, as you mentioned, Goldie, is managing screen time.
Mm.
Kids today are stuck to their screens, constantly on social media or playing video games, as you mentioned. But you can't exactly blame them because they were born into that. We've discussed this also before, right? That they use AI and ChatGPT even better than we do, honestly. And you really can't do a lot about it, because when you ask them why they're always on their phones, they say it's because you don't have time to spend with me. And that makes parents feel guilty because they really don't have the time to spend with them. It's really hard to be present with them even when you're actually physically around them, because there's so much you have to get done at home. There are calls you have to take constantly, Zoom meetings. You barely have time for yourself. So whenever you want some time for yourself and you don't want to be interrupted or distracted by your kids, you just give them the screen, the devices, and say, go figure. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of kind of guilt that comes up because you're thinking, am I doing the right thing by my kid? I know that it will mess with their development to an extent, but at that moment you don't have the good sense to be intentional about it, right? The second thing, of course, is advice overload. Parents today are drowning in advice, right? There's Instagram reels, parenting coaches, massive extended families giving all sorts of advice, right? And all this advice is so drastically different from each other's that you don't actually know what to do. One side will say, don't shout at them, it scars them. And the other one says, the world is a tough place. They need to be able to handle hardships. You have to slap them if you need to also. It's so contrasting, you don't know what to do, right? Ironically, this has created a generation of parents who are doing more than any other cohort before them. Still, they don't feel like they're doing enough. Then there's a third struggle, which is uh, the identity crisis struggle. Something that a lot of parents think, but they won't say out loud in a public forum. And you and I, Goldie, have heard it being told to us in private, which is that I love my child, but I don't know who I am anymore beyond just being the parent of my child, right? Because you're not just raising a child, you're also the therapist, you're the nutritionist, you're the cook, you're the tech moderator, and you're the protector from all existential threats which you'd have no idea about, really. All this is happening while you're juggling your work, your relationships, your aging parents, and your own mental health, right? And God forbid if you complain about it. Oh, you aren't devoted to your family. This isn't how you should be thinking. This is your duty. You must be attentive with your kids, and you must have 18 limbs to get all this done, basically, right? Now, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but in today's nuclear family setting and culture, you are that entire village. And then, of course, they end up coming to you and to me, people like us, coaches and therapists, and support professionals, basically, to help navigate all of this. I've just shared a few of the struggles that I hear about commonly based on the coaching conversations I have and even the regular conversations I have amongst parents who are raising Gen Alpha today. What are some that are coming to your mind?
I think for me, the statement "it takes a village" has been somewhat misconstrued for Gen Alpha, because although there are so many resources available today and a bunch of individuals, professionals that we can reach out to in the nuclear home, in the direct environment of the child, we see a lot less individuals. So you may have this peripheral village, let's call it a village, yeah? But that village is just peripheral. It's not having, you can choose to have influence on your control over what you do in the home. Because in the home, it's mom, dad, at best, maybe one more child, and there's 2 plus 2. So it's a family of 4. And you may even just see a family of 3, because a lot of parents, as we know, are also opting for single child parenting. So essentially, it's a bit of a conflict, because you think you have all these people available for you, but what they're probably doing is more of a disservice to your inner thinker, your inner voice, your inner gut instinct. There's a thing called maternal instinct. It's actually a thing. And you may take on all the advice of the world as a parent, but I feel that alpha parents are somehow subconsciously falling prey to these voices, and it's making them so anxious and overwhelmed with second guessing their own parenting, which is why they're losing, their identity. And I think for me, it's about time to go back to basics and ask yourself, who are you and what are your values? And yes, we have all this advice and we have these parents that are our friends and supposedly giving us this incredible advice. But you know what? Sometimes their child has one recipe that works for them, but your child has your recipe. So we can't, first of all, we have to stop this comparison game where everyone needs to go to the best schools. And if they're in the best schools and they're friends of friends, stop talking about your child like he's a trophy. I see a lot of that too. Everyone's in competition. I get it. You want the best for your child, but this is not a competition where parents have to be competing with each other for who does better, because that's doing is two things. It's adding pressure on the child because of the energy that you're transmitting to them. And it's also adding pressure to you as a parent because you think you're never doing enough because you're in direct competition with the next friend stroke parent in
Yeah.
your chat group.
I mean, it's like, I mean, when you're in a work environment already, it's competitive, it's cutthroat. You already have to, whether you like it or not, operate from a place of competition over there. Now, when you come back home, also, if you're in this 24/7, 365 competitive headspace, it's obviously going to, I mean, not to mention the toll it takes on your health also, like your physical health, even, right? We know so much about the way that cortisol and stress, the hormones work, and when they're, uh, in this fight or flight mode 24/7, it's going to take a toll, right? And I like the fact that you shared quite a few of the ways to kind of consider what we can do about the current state of affairs in parenting today, because that very neatly takes us to the next section of this episode, which is what can we actually do about it, right? Now, of course, this part is a little tricky. Parents today have more, say, awareness and information and responsibility than ever before, and there's also a lot more pressure to get it right. uh,
Yeah.
a good amount of the pressure is put on themselves, as you just mentioned, Goli. Having spoken to and worked with a few parents myself, I noticed that what they're actually looking for is like permission to not be perfect parents. Permission to really be themselves. What you said about who
Yeah.
are you, what are your values, right? They're looking for permission to slow down, to let go of this ideal parent image, and to be able to say I don't know without feeling guilty or ashamed of themselves, right? They want to be present, and they want their kids to know that as well. What I understand is that your job as a parent is not to raise a child who never makes mistakes. It's to raise a child who knows they can come to you when they do, right? If you're able to instill that in your child, I think you also kind of, take your leg off the pedal and allow yourself to make mistakes and not feel so miserable about it, right? Yesterday, I spoke to a parent of an 18-year-old. Now, this is, of course, not a Gen Alpha, who's leaving for college. She was talking to him about relationships and physical intimacy and alcohol and everything that a typical parent would worry about when you send your kids off to college. While she was very clear that she doesn't condone any of this, she wanted her son to know, to protect himself, to take care of himself, and know that he can always come to her no matter what the situation is, right? And then, there's this term that we spoke about, village, right? That idea is
Yeah.
gone because uh, the setting is such, right? But you can, in a way, build your own, like for yourself, if not for your kids itself, right? So it's like, we know, like, parents who are putting together these communities of conscious parents who understand, how the struggles are, and they want to help each other with how they can raise their kids together in a way, right?
Yeah.
So you have to build your own support system, find a coach, a therapist, whoever, a fitness trainer, anybody who helps you when things get hard,
Yeah.
and you're not able to separate your own triggers from your parenting instincts. That maternal instinct term that you use, it's so key, right? It's like the village is not necessarily for the children, it's for you almost.
Yeah.
I also recently spoke to someone who mentioned the importance of getting down to the level of the kids and finding a method of like mutual accountability. Be honest with them when you make a mistake, when you shout at them or whatever. Own it and talk about how you'll rectify it and what you learn from it moving forward. It's very like coach like, you know.
Yeah.
You take your learning, you say this is what I'm going to do with it, and this is how I'm going to move forward, how it's going to show up in other areas of my life, and all of those things. Because having spoken to these kids as well, when they're not on their gadgets, uh, it's like they don't want you to be their hero. You know, they don't want you to do everything for them. They just really need you to be available. And I think it's our responsibility as not parents or whoever adults, let's say, to ask them what available means for them, and
Yeah.
to show up accordingly, right? These are just some ideas coming up for me, not from theory, but from having had like a few conversations both with the parents and the children as well.
Yeah.
Uh, you've had so many more interactions, Goldie. What are some of the ideas coming up for you?
I think the main thread that's connecting everything here for me is the relationship building that we sometimes forget actually as parents. You know, parenting, the word itself, it seems like a verb.
Yeah,
It's
I know
like,
you feel a particular way about it, right?
yeah, I just don't like it. You know, am I parenting? Am I mothering? Am I swimming? Am I running? Like, is it going to be like that? And you know, the funniest thing is there is literally no book to teach you how to parent. You know, you choose to have children in your life and you decide to raise a family, but you know there's literally no degree out there that teaches you how to do this best. So where is all this perfection coming from? Again, from outside. And I think the village is truly what you said, the key component of what will give you some sense of sanity. Or you know, the opposite end would be it would just drive you insane. And I think it begins with you telling yourself, I'm not parenting, I'm just trying to create a connection with this individual who I have given birth to. And, you know, instead of parenting, we can just say, let's try to learn from each other, which is where conscious parenting comes from. The whole, you know, the whole foundation of conscious parenting is about understanding who you are first and recognizing that your triggers cannot be passed on to your child, because that's where generational trauma remains trauma and isn't broken down or, you know, dissolved or healed. And I always think of values as a set of beliefs that you have carried with yourself as an adult, but they do carry some form of trauma still, because you also haven't resolved a lot of your own things from your childhood days. Now, just think of it as you're passing on the same set of values to your these brand new children, and but they're born in a completely different time in their lives than you. So you may be not only recycling some values that are no longer serving you, but you're also passing on values and expecting them to work for them. And so that whole equation is bound to, you know, it's not built for success, right? Which is why having a good tribe, a solid tribe that is able to see you where you are today, is going to enable you to be that mom or that dad who understands their child and is able to also live out of fear, because I think fear is the biggest emotion that I'm sort of sensing and breathing amongst parents. Oh, but this might happen. And, oh, you know, if I don't let them do this, then this will happen. But if I let them do this, I'm also scared. I mean, if you're not going to let go of your fear, that's not going to help in any case for you to grow and flourish and then help your child. So yeah, I think solutions are many, but you know, I always believe in simplicity. So understand yourself first, and what is your objective for the day. Don't even see it as a 5-year plan. Like, go back to, what am I going to do this week? And maybe one of your first priorities is, I'm going to spend quality time with my child, where I'm guilty of being on my own screen, which we are, which is what they say. Oh, but it's because you don't have time for me. Ask yourself, where's that statement? That's such simple words coming from. Where are they coming from? They're actually coming from the truth, because monkey see, monkey do. Gen Alpha were not born to be on their phones. Let's just get that one thing very clear. They were born just like you and I, just in a time when it's easier to give them the phone. We were born in a time where phones did not exist. At least I was. So we were given what was available then. And I'm not saying that I'm a better raised child than I have raised mine and the next. It's about asking yourself, what works for my child? So maybe the phone does work. I have nothing against screens and technology. But if you see that it's harming them, then find a balance. Too much TikTok can be bad, but a little bit of TikTok is not bad.
Yeah, I love what you said that Gen Alpha weren't like born to be on the screen. So it's not like they came out of the womb with a phone in their hands, right? That's not
No.
how it. It's at some point, whether we were conscious or mindful or intentional or not, we handed over screens to them, and then we're complaining about it. As you said, monkey see, donkey do, right? Like you allow them to see this stuff and you complain about it. And that's kind of how it is right now. It's a good point. Very good
Yeah.
points, actually. Yeah.
I do also know of parents, Lakshan, this is the other extreme of alpha, where they're quite literally raising their kids in a bubble where they have no access to screens, they have no
Yeah.
interaction with TV or games. Now, I would question, is that also the right solution for the child who is born in 2020, 2021, or back, because we can't say 25 because they're no longer alpha, they're beta. Uh, but the concept here to understand is, address the reality of the world, acknowledge your insecurities that you're facing, your fears, and then work around them. We have so much to be grateful for. I think that is one thing that's not practiced enough. Even as parents of Gen Z or even millennial parenting, I mean, we have to understand that there's this whole idea of instant gratification, which has gone to such a level, again, through whether it's food delivery apps, which is such a basic and almost harmless concept, but it's instant, isn't it? You can just click and get food sent to your door. Now, we need to be very grateful for such things. And that is what I think is where the balance is broken. Things are taken for granted, and a lot of parents are fearing this surge of their kids have everything and too much of it available to them, whether it's stimulus of information, food, left, right, and center varieties of anything and everything. But the basics are kind of fizzling out.
We've been speaking for 25 minutes almost in this
Yeah.
episode, and we covered like so many aspects of the things from the parents' side, right? Like what the struggles are today, how they came to be, and what they can potentially do about it as well. But
Mm.
one important thing we didn't really cover in this conversation is about Gen Alpha themselves.
Yeah.
More specifically, what is the impact that the pandemic has had on the development of Gen Alpha kids, right? And we spoke about that extensively with an expert in child education and a licensed
Yes.
psychologist. Please watch that next. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, check out episode 41 next. With that, we come to the end of episode 44 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co-host, Goldie.
Thank you so much for listening, watching, and tuning in all the way to the very end.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.